So just to clarify, we are in fact going to do an indefinite number of episodes leading up to the Proxyopoly score this season on the Proxyopoly Podcast. Welcome back, all you bulls and bears and betas out there, to the spin-out of this Proxyopoly spin-off we call the Proxyopoly Podcast. I'm the Proxyopolist, formerly known as the Jackal of Trades, from the Game of Proxyopoly Podcast, now streaming here on the Proxyopoly Podcast for free wherever you get your Proxyopoly Podcast. Now, without further delay, we will be deliberating the absurdist corporate buzzwords from the Game of Proxyopoly Podcast here on the Proxyopoly Podcast, as well as diving into the proposed amendments to Proxyopoly of the whole and its alternative forms and its subsequent bylaws. Now, without further delay, the Proxyopoly score will be premiering this season on the Proxyopoly Podcast. So don't go anywhere, Proxyopolis. The Jackal of Trades and all of the Proxyopolis of Proxyopoly of the whole and its alternative forms will be gathered here on the Proxyopoly Podcast to deliberate the absurdist corporate buzzwords from the Game of Proxyopoly Podcast for your entertainment and educational listening pleasure. And we're all going to do this in a perhaps 15 to 20 minute time span. And of course, with supplementary reading materials, research documents, mock prospectuses, etc., can always be found on the Linktree at linktree/NASCARCosa. And to the listener tuning in for the first time, welcome to the Proxyopoly Podcast. The very first podcast in the world featuring the issuance of Proxyopoly scores to various non-fictional Proxyopolies based on the anti-logarithm of proxy variables for non-financial performance. If these things sound familiar, that's because you likely listened to them on the Game of Proxyopoly Podcast, and you are now enjoying them here on the Proxyopoly Podcast, awaiting further announcements of additional proprietary calculations related to the Proxyopoly score as intellectual property protected under the trademark of Proxyopoly. That was a mouthful, wasn't it, Proxyopolist at home? We could have all done this a little bit simpler, perhaps by clicking on the link tree, going to the Patreon under that subsequent link tree, and viewing the mock prospectuses therein under that Patreon. For a cheap subscription price, you subscribe as an Ego Pro, Ergo Pro, or Pro Zero subscriber, filling in the blanks as need be. You can play the Game of Proxyopoly yourself, perhaps without listening to the Game of Proxyopoly Podcast or the Proxyopoly Podcast, and applying Proxyopoly scores to your own Proxyopolies. However, mock performance is not indicative of mock returns, and mock investments do involve mock risks. That's why we're discussing, perhaps, where real investments involve real risks, and where real performance is not indicative of real returns. And that's where the Proxyopoly Podcast comes into play, my fellow Proxyopolists. There will be, or at least we will strive for, very little intermissions or cuts here on the Proxyopoly Podcast, keeping the content exclusive to Proxyopolists who are loyal to the Proxyopoly. Early, of course. And we, on behalf of Proxyopoly of the whole and its alternative forms, are pleased to announce we'll be segueing into the crowdfunding phase of developments here of the Proxyopoly. That's right, Proxyopolists. If you're listening to this, you can also play along to the Game of Proxyopoly live. As crowdfunding efforts are underway, perhaps there will be Kickstarters and donation efforts, and as well as more subscriptions to enhance your game-playing efforts of the Proxyopoly system. Yeah, you get the point. It's the spin-out. Anything can happen. We're gonna maybe have some characters show up, some friends of the Proxyopoly, and maybe even deliberate these buzzwords with the experts that should be deliberating them alongside the audience of the general partner at large, whom should be listening to them. And of course, the rules of gameplay of Proxyopoly, the mock proxy voting policy and guidelines, and the bylaws of Proxyopoly of the whole and its alternative forms are always subject to change at the behest of the general partner at large. Ergo, any Proxyopolist on the board of Proxyopoly may submit their mock proposal to amendments to the bylaws of Proxyopoly of the whole and its alternative forms by selecting the Contact Proxyopoly option on the link tree. Albeit notwithstanding no further responses from the general partner at large, the Proxyopoly podcast will continue to disperse episodes on an ad hoc basis as the default option to proceed. And it occurs to the Proxyopolists at home, at large, here and abroad, that there are cards to be played and discarded in the game of Proxyopoly.
We are the shackles of the general partner at large.
More about these cards from the Jackal of Trading Card Games,
placing a Proxyopoly code code to the Jackal of Trading Card Games. SLUGCRUST. Please support to the Proxyopoly Podcast. SLUGCRUST. Please support to the Proxyopoly Podcast. Twang.
I'd like to announce my candidacy for Shreveport Mortician. The Jackal 2020. I'll shit in your open mouth.
How the hell y'all doing, Proxyopoly of the whole and its alternative forms? I'm SLUGCRUST, the Jackal of Trading Card Games, and a friendly game of Proxyopoly brought to you by Proxyopoly of the whole and its alternative forms. I reckon you cold called the Jackal of Trading Card Games because you're looking to discard a few dissident proxy cards, procurement cards, and protraction cards to the Proxyopoly system. Well, look no further. Just contact Proxyopoly today on the link tree by selecting the Contact Proxyopoly option. And once again, albeit notwithstanding, no feedback means the default option proceeds. The Proxyopoly podcast will be dropping surprise episodes on an ad hoc basis as necessary. To define the terms of the Proxyopoly, or if you wish to find out more information or even contribute your own proposed amendments to the bylaws of Proxyopoly of the whole and its alternative forms, SLUGCRUST once again reminds the Proxyopolist at home that you may do so by selecting the Contact Proxyopoly option. Proxyopoly. So, you're starting to put it all together, are you, Proxyopolist? Proxy Zero has, in fact, absconded with the Proxyopoly scores. Crossing parallels of the Proxyopolies and breaking the barriers between the two. These Proxyopoly scores and other digital assets of Proxyopoly are now in the hands of Proxy Zero. And Proxyopoly needs your help, Proxyopolists, to get those Proxyopoly scores back so they may be assigned to their proper Proxyopoly here in the non-fictional realm of operation, which we know to be true on the Proxyopoly podcast. And of course, the invitation to other Proxyopolis is out there in the market. Other offers may be on the table, but I assure it may be worth your time to go on this podcast and discuss the terminology of the mock proxy voting policy and guidelines and each subsection therein. The management proposals and stakeholder proposals of Proxyopoly of the whole and its alternative forms are going to be proceeding. And tick-tock. Tick-tock, time's a wasting, Proxyopoly. There's only so much time to go before the next episode of the Proxyopoly podcast drops. Surprise! Thank you, NASCAR Cosa, for that riveting update from the realm of Proxyopoly with regard to the Proxyopoly scores now being in the hands of Proxy Zero. I dare say, Proxyopoly, this is an unforeseen turn of events here on the Proxyopoly podcast. My counsel has advised me that all matters were taken care of, but I suppose that Proxy Zero, having possession of the Proxyopoly scores, which have been assigned to various non-fictional Proxyopolies, will now have to be found by the Proxyopolist at home on the Linktree at Linktree/NASCAR Cosa. So stay tuned, Proxyopolis, for more exclusive content from Proxyopoly. Not limited to digital assets that are Proxyopoly scores. Available via subscription on Patreon. Send your money to Proxyopoly. That's right, step right up. Donations to Proxyopoly can be sent via PayPal. Send your money to the Proxyopoly by selecting the Send Your Money to Proxyopoly option. And for advertising opportunities here on Proxyopoly, select the Contact Proxyopoly option. At Linktree/NASCAR Cosa. Linktree/NASCAR Cosa. Linktree/NASCAR Cosa. I'm the Jackal of Trades. Signing off on this spin-out episode of the spin-off, formerly known as the Proxyopoly Podcast, brought to you by Proxyopoly of the whole and its alternative forms. But that's enough for now, Proxyopoly. Stay tuned for the next episode of the Proxyopoly Podcast. Will it be the Proxyopoly score? Will there be another spin-out? Could there theoretically be infinite numbers of spin-outs prior to the premiere of the Proxyopoly score on the Proxyopoly Podcast? It would seem that there are plausibly an indefinite number of episodes that one can do prior to the premiere of the Proxyopoly score. However, in good faith, we intend to be clear about the nature of that premiere here on the Proxyopoly Podcast, so be advised, Proxyopolis. Stay tuned on the Proxyopoly Podcast, premiere of the Proxyopoly score. For the time being, we will have news from the streets of Proxyopoly as well as a word from our sponsors. Thank you, Proxyopoly. Hello, Proxyopoly. I'm Jesse Colbertic. Buying airtime on the Proxyopoly Podcast to remind the Proxyopolist at home that if you enjoyed the discharge of the general partner from the Game of Proxyopoly Podcast and are currently enjoying the Proxyopoly Podcast, well, you're in luck. SLUGCRUST is dropping Discharged this Friday, June 28th, 2024, and will be available wherever you get your SLUGCRUST. That's right. Discharged drops June 28th, 2024. Discharged drops June 28th, 2024. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoy.
Oh, but you can't get away that easily, Proxyopoly. It's me, Proxy Zero, to announce that I do indeed have the Proxyopoly scores assigned to the non-fictional Proxyopolies known to Proxyopoly. And if you want these Proxyopoly scores back, Proxyopoly, you're gonna have to play the game of Proxyopoly. Whose side would you be on? What will prevail in this Proxyopoly spin-off when there's another Proxyopoly system operating in a separate realm? But how many mock proxies are there, Proxyopoly? We need to consult the Shredmaster Supreme. Shredmaster Supreme. Shredmaster Supreme. Tell us about the Shredmaster Supreme, Shredmaster Supreme, Shredmaster Supreme. Tell us about the Shredmaster Supreme, Shredmaster Supreme, Shredmaster Supreme. Tell us about the Shredmaster Supreme. Drang.
And that concludes relevant material updates for this episode of the Proxyopoly Podcast. I'm the Jackal of Trades. Live from the streets of Proxyopoly, thanks for tuning in, Proxyopolis. Before a final word from our sponsors, a reminder that the Proxyopoly score premieres this season on the Proxyopoly Podcast. Don't miss it, Proxyopolis. Now, a word from our sponsors.
Hey Cat Daddy, Derick from SLUGCRUST here, dropping in to let your listeners know we've got your latest Songs to Ride Your Jet Ski To playlist for this summer. Our new EP Discharge hits the waves this Friday. Stay cool out there.